Imagine walking into a doctor's office, vulnerable and worried, only to lock eyes with the ghost of your first love, the one who vanished without a trace 20 years ago. For Eleanor, a routine checkup for debilitating migraines turns into a head-on collision with a past she thought was buried. Can a love lost to time and secrets be rekindled amidst a health crisis and a life-changing opportunity continents away? This story of destiny, heartbreak, and impossible second chances will keep you on the edge of your seat. What's the most shocking coincidence you've ever experienced? Tell us in the comments. And before we unravel this tangled past, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. You won't want to miss a moment of this. You can undress and put on this gown, please. Dr. Hayes will be in shortly, the nurse indicated before leaving the examination room. Eleanor Vance sighed as she held the thin hospital gown in her hands. At 38, she still hated these medical consultations. The migraines she had been suffering lately had begun to affect her work as an art restorer, and with her major exhibition only 3 weeks away, she couldn't afford any more delays. With efficient movements, she removed her blouse and trousers, placing them carefully on the chair. The examination room, with its white walls and clinical light, gave her a strange sense of vulnerability. She wrapped herself in the gown, sitting on the examination table while she waited. When the door opened, Eleanor looked up, expecting to see some middle-aged doctor. The man who entered, however, left her paralyzed. Tall, with dark, slightly wavy hair and unmistakable blue eyes. Time had matured his features, but she would recognize that face anywhere. "Good morning. I'm Dr. Julian." The doctor's words cut off abruptly when their eyes met. The medical file he was holding remained suspended in mid-air, while a dense silence filled the room. "Eleanor?" he finally uttered, his voice barely audible. Eleanor clutched the gown, suddenly conscious of her semi-undressed state. 20 years had passed since the last time she was in front of Julian Hayes, and now he was there, wearing a white coat with a stethoscope around his neck. "Julian," she confirmed, a mixture of disbelief and nervousness in her voice. I didn't know you were a neurologist." He seemed to regain his professional composure, though the color had drained from his face. "And I didn't know you would be my patient," he replied, clearing his throat as he consulted the file. "I see you've been suffering from severe migraines." Eleanor nodded, watching how Julian tried to maintain a facade of professionalism that barely concealed his turmoil. "They started a few months ago. They interfere with my work," she explained, grateful to have something concrete to talk about. "What do you do now?" he asked as he approached with a small penlight to examine her pupils. "I'm an art restorer. I have an important exhibition soon." Julian nodded, his face now inches from hers as he performed the exam. Eleanor could perceive his cologne, a subtle, masculine fragrance that awakened memories buried for 2 decades. "You were always talented with art," he commented with a slight smile, and for a moment they were those teenagers again in that lakeside town in Michigan, sharing dreams under the starry sky. The examination continued in a silence fraught with tension. Julian's hands, firm and professional, contrasted with the intensity of his gaze whenever their eyes met. "The last time I saw you was the night before you disappeared," Eleanor finally said, when he finished taking her vital signs. "You didn't even say goodbye." Julian paused, his professional expression giving way for an instant. "I didn't know we were leaving until that very morning, my father." He stopped himself. "Perhaps we should discuss your treatment plan first." Eleanor nodded, but the damage was done. The memories of that summer, when she was 18 and believed in eternal love, returned like an avalanche. The afternoons on the boat, the stolen kisses, the whispered promises. And then, the morning she discovered that Julian and his family had left for Paris without any explanation. "We'll need to do some additional tests," he continued, returning to his role as a doctor. "CT scans, blood work. I want to rule out any serious problems." "Should I be worried?" Eleanor asked, suddenly aware that her health was in the hands of the boy who had broken her heart. Julian looked at her directly, and for a moment she saw the young man she had known, honest and direct. I don't think so, but I prefer to be thorough, he replied. Eleanor, this is unexpected. She smiled faintly. For me too. Of all the neurologists in Chicago, fate has a strange sense of humor, he completed. When the consultation ended, Eleanor dressed slowly, processing what had happened. As she stepped into the hallway, Julian was waiting for her with the orders for the tests. My assistant will coordinate the dates for the exams, he said, maintaining a professional tone despite the evident tension between them. There will be several visits. Their eyes met once more, and Eleanor knew this reunion had barely begun. 20 years is a long time, Julian, she murmured. Yes, he replied with an inscrutable expression. But some things don't change. Eleanor took the papers he offered, and their fingers brushed briefly, sending a familiar current through her skin. Some things indeed didn't change at all. The following days passed like a fever dream for Eleanor. As she underwent various neurological exams, she couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. The MRIs and EEGs seemed less invasive than the glances she exchanged with Julian during each visit. Do you have a family? He asked during their third consultation while reviewing preliminary results. Eleanor noticed how he avoided the word husband or partner. A daughter, Lily. She's 16, she replied, observing the surprise on his face. I divorced 2 years ago. Julian nodded, jotting something in the file. And you? She dared to ask. Divorced too, 5 years now, he replied without looking up. No children. I returned to Chicago after my marriage ended. Why did you come back? I understood your career in Paris was successful. Julian finally looked at her. Sometimes we need to return to our roots to remember who we are, he said with a half smile. Or perhaps he was simply fleeing from ghosts. The silence that followed was laden with unasked questions. 20 years of absence condensed into furtive glances and measured comments. During the fourth visit, Lily accompanied Eleanor. The teenager, with her mother's dark hair and expressive eyes, curiously observed the doctor treating her mother. So, you and my mom knew each other when you were young? Lily asked directly, ignoring Eleanor's warning look. Julian smiled, surprised by the girl's frankness. Yes, during a summer by a lake in Michigan, a long time ago. And then you went to Paris without saying goodbye? Lily continued, narrowing her eyes with suspicion. Lily, Eleanor intervened, embarrassed. It was complicated, Julian replied, his expression a mix of guilt and nostalgia. Sometimes adults make mistakes they can't explain until many years later. The answer seemed to momentarily satisfy Lily, who continued to observe him with interest as he examined her mother. That same afternoon, Julian finally established a diagnosis. Eleanor listened attentively as he explained about migraines with aura and the need for ongoing treatment. We'll need to monitor you regularly, at least for a few months, he explained, and Eleanor couldn't help but wonder if she liked the idea or was uncomfortable with it. Is it serious? She asked, suddenly aware that she had been more worried about seeing Julian again than about her own health. It's nothing we can't manage, he reassured her. But I want to make sure these migraines don't interfere with your work. You mentioned an important exhibition. In 3 weeks, Eleanor confirmed. It's the culmination of 2 years restoring colonial period artworks. I always knew you'd do something extraordinary with your talent, he commented, and for a moment, the doctor gave way to the young man who had once loved her. It was during the next visit that everything changed. Eleanor, exhausted from preparing for the exhibition and sleepless nights, suddenly collapsed while Julian was checking her reflexes. He instinctively caught her, his arms around her as he helped her lie back on the examination table. Eleanor, can you hear me? His professional voice failed to completely hide his panic. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on the table with Julian leaning over her, their faces inches apart. The proximity was overwhelming, awakening sensations she thought forgotten. I'm fine, she murmured, though her heart was racing. Just a dizzy spell. Julian kept a hand on her shoulder, as if afraid she might faint again. The tension between them, contained for weeks of professional interactions, seemed about to overflow. "Your pressure is low," he finally said, moving away to get a glass of water. "Have you been eating properly?" Eleanor accepted the water, their fingers brushing briefly. "The exhibition, the migraines, I haven't had much appetite." He observed her with concern, and Eleanor was certain it wasn't just his medical gaze evaluating her. At the end of that consultation, Julian remained seated at his desk longer than usual, as if fighting an internal battle. Finally, he made a decision. "I can't continue to be your doctor," he declared abruptly. Eleanor looked at him, surprised. "Did I do something wrong?" "On the contrary," he replied, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "I'm transferring your case to my colleague, Dr. Ramsey. She's excellent." "Because of what happened 20 years ago?" Eleanor challenged, feeling a pang of pain at the thought of not seeing him again. Julian looked at her directly, completely abandoning his professional facade. "Because of what's happening now," he responded honestly. "I can't maintain the necessary objectivity. Not with you." Julian just made a huge professional sacrifice, or perhaps a very personal move. What do you think, viewers? Is it ethical for him to step down? And what does this mean for him and Eleanor? Can they truly rekindle a romance after all this time and under these circumstances? Share your opinions in the comments below. And if you're feeling the tension and the rekindled sparks, give this video a thumbs up. The silence that followed was charged with possibilities. Eleanor understood they were at a turning point. Julian wasn't distancing himself from her, but eliminating the barrier that prevented them from exploring what still existed between them. "I understand," she said finally. "And what happens after you stop being my doctor?" A slight smile appeared on Julian's face. "That depends on you," he replied, handing her a small piece of paper with a phone number. "This is my personal number. No longer as your doctor, but as someone who would like to make up for lost time." Eleanor finished, taking the paper, feeling the weight of 2 decades of unanswered questions, of an interrupted love that never had the chance to discover its potential. "I have an exhibition in 3 weeks, she said, carefully tucking the number away. "Perhaps you'd like to attend." Julian's smile widened, lighting up his face in a way Eleanor remembered perfectly. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." The gallery gleamed under the carefully positioned lights that enhanced each restored artwork. Eleanor moved through the space, checking the final details before the first guests arrived. Her midnight blue dress contrasted elegantly with the white walls as she greeted critics and collectors who were beginning to arrive. "Are you nervous?" observed Lily, beautiful in her black dress, more mature than her 16 years suggested. "It's normal. It's my first exhibition as project director," Eleanor replied, though both knew her nervousness had another name. A week had passed since Julian gave her his personal number. A week of cautious messages that gradually became more personal, closer to conversations they might have had 20 years ago. They had agreed to meet at the exhibition, away from the clinical environment that had defined their reunion. It was while she was talking to the museum director that Eleanor saw him enter. Julian, elegant in a dark blue suit, paused at the entrance, searching for her with his gaze. When their eyes met, the smile that lit up his face made time seem to stand still. "Excuse me," Eleanor murmured to the director, who followed her gaze and smiled understandingly. As she approached Julian, she felt a teenage nervousness she thought long forgotten. He greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, a simple gesture that awakened complex sensations. "Dr. Ramsey was right," he commented by way of greeting. "Migraines lessen when stress decreases." Eleanor smiled. "Technically, I'm more stressed than ever." "Then it must be something else that makes you shine tonight," he replied, looking at her with an admiration that went beyond mere politeness. Eleanor offered to show him around the exhibition, explaining the delicate restoration process of each piece. Julian listened attentively, fascinated as much by her knowledge as by the passion with which she spoke. "It's amazing how you can bring life back to something that seemed lost," he commented in front of a colonial canvas depicting a historic Chicago port in the 18th century. Sometimes what seems lost is just waiting for the opportunity to be rediscovered, she replied, aware of the double meaning of her words. The night progressed, and the exhibition was a success. Critics praised Eleanor's work, and several pieces already had offers from private collectors. However, she could only focus on the moments she was near Julian, on the electricity that seemed to vibrate between them whenever they accidentally brushed against each other. Lily observed the interaction with barely concealed curiosity, and when the guests finally began to leave, she approached her mother. "I'm going with Paula and her mom," she announced, looking significantly towards Julian, who was chatting with an art critic. "Don't wait up for me." "Lily, it's not what," Eleanor began, but her daughter interrupted her with a knowing smile. "Mom, you've been turning down every invitation for 2 years. You deserve this," she said, kissing her on the cheek before leaving. When the last guest had departed, Eleanor found Julian contemplating a small painting depicting a sunset over Lake Michigan. His eyes reflected a mixture of melancholy and hope. "This one reminds me of our spot," he said softly. "The hill where we used to watch the sun go down." Eleanor moved closer, feeling the warmth of his presence. "I restored it years ago, before I knew you'd come back into my life. Perhaps a part of me never left that hill." Julian turned to her, his gaze intense. "You must be hungry. I know a place nearby that's still open at this hour." The restaurant was small and cozy, with dim lights and soft music. Seated across from each other, the conversation flowed more freely than in all their previous interactions. "How did you end up becoming a neurologist?" Eleanor asked, as they shared a bottle of red wine. "My father fell ill shortly after we arrived in Paris," Julian explained. "A brain tumor. Watching the doctor's work, understanding how his brain functioned, fascinated me even amidst the pain." "I'm sorry," Eleanor murmured. "I didn't know. I never had a chance to explain," he replied. "He recovered, fortunately, but that experience defined my path." "And why did you really come back to Chicago?" "Paris must offer better opportunities." Julian swirled his wine thoughtfully. "My divorce was complicated. Catherine, my ex-wife, never understood why I guarded memories of the States so jealously, why every summer I became distant." Eleanor looked at him, surprised. "Because of me?" "Because of us," he corrected. "Because of what we represented. Freedom, honesty, love without compromises or expectations. I suppose a part of me always wondered what would have happened if we had stayed." The confession hung between them as dinner continued. Eleanor told him about her marriage to Marcus, about how Lily's birth had transformed her life, and how eventually they realized they had become strangers sharing a daughter. "And now?" Julian asked as they left the restaurant, walking slowly under the stars. "What's next for the successful restorer Eleanor Vance?" "Honestly, I don't know," she replied. "For years, my life has been Lily and my work. I didn't allow myself to think beyond that. And now," Eleanor stopped, looking at him directly. "Now I wonder if fate has given us a second chance." Julian took her hand gently, a simple gesture that unleashed a whirlwind of emotions. "I'd like to believe so." When they arrived at Eleanor's apartment building, the tension between them was palpable, charged with history and possibilities. "There's so much I still haven't told you," Julian murmured, standing at her door. "So much you need to know about why we left." "We have time," she replied, squeezing his hand lightly. "This time we have time." They said goodbye with a soft kiss, barely a brush of lips that promised more. As Eleanor closed the door, she felt something that had been dormant for 20 years finally awaken within her. For the first time in a long time, the future seemed full of promises instead of routines. The relationship between Eleanor and Julian flourished in the following weeks. After the exhibition, they began to see each other regularly. Quiet dinners, walks through Lincoln Park, afternoons in cafes where they talked for hours as if trying to compress 20 years into each encounter. "Did you ever look for me?" Eleanor asked one afternoon as they walked along the Chicago lakefront, watching the gray-blue water. Julian was silent for a moment, his gaze lost on the horizon. Every summer for 5 years, I went back to that Michigan lake town, he confessed finally. I asked for you at our usual spots, even visited your Aunt Martha, but she told me you had returned to Chicago and were in university. She never told me? Eleanor murmured, surprised. I asked her not to, he replied with a sad smile. My father was in serious trouble, Eleanor. Debts, threats. I didn't want to drag you into that world. Eleanor was processing this revelation when she felt the world begin to spin around her. The colors intensified painfully, and the sunset lights transformed into blinding flashes. Eleanor, are you okay? Julian's voice sounded distant, as if coming from the end of a tunnel. My head, was all she could say before her legs gave way. She awoke in a hospital room, the constant beeping of monitors marking the rhythm of the silence. Julian was by her side, holding her hand with a mixture of professional and personal concern. What happened? She asked, her mouth dry. You had a severe episode? He explained, his calm voice contrasting with the tension in his face. I brought you to the clinic immediately. Eleanor tried to sit up, but Julian gently stopped her. You need to rest. Dr. Ramsey will be here soon. Are you here as a doctor or as? She let the question hang in the air. As the man who can't bear to see you suffer, he replied, squeezing her hand lightly. But I let my colleagues handle your treatment. I wouldn't trust my medical judgment right now. While they waited for the doctor, Julian stayed by her side, telling her stories of his years in Paris to distract her from the pain. At one point, when he thought she was dozing, he continued speaking in a low voice. I wrote you dozens of letters, he confessed, gently stroking her hair. Letters I never sent because my father intercepted them. He said clean breaks were more merciful. Eleanor opened her eyes, surprised by the revelation. Why did you never tell me? Shame, I suppose, he admitted. And later, when I was finally free to contact you, I found out you were married, expecting a daughter. It seemed selfish to disrupt your life. The arrival of Dr. Ramsey interrupted the conversation. The physician, a woman in her 50s with a serene expression, reviewed Eleanor's results while Julian waited in a corner, now clearly in his role as a companion. We'll need to do more tests, the doctor explained, but I believe we might be dealing with something more complex than simple migraines. The words fell like stones in Eleanor's stomach. Julian visibly tensed, and she could see him struggling not to intervene professionally. How serious is it? Eleanor asked, trying to remain calm. I don't want to alarm you unnecessarily, Dr. Ramsey replied, but I prefer to be cautious. When the doctor left, a heavy silence filled the room. Julian took her hand again, and Eleanor felt the slight tremor in his fingers. You'll be fine, he assured her, though Eleanor noted the effort it took him to maintain his composure. Dr. Ramsey is excellent. You're scared, she observed, and scared doctors are never a good sign. Before Julian could respond, the door opened abruptly. Marcus, Eleanor's ex-husband, entered with a worried expression, followed by a visibly distressed Lily. Mom! The teenager exclaimed, rushing to the bed. The clinic called us. Why didn't you let me know? Everything happened so fast, honey, Eleanor explained, casting an apologetic glance at Julian, who had discreetly stepped aside. Marcus, however, noticed him immediately. And you? He asked curtly. Julian Hayes, he replied with professional calm. He's a friend, Eleanor intervened. He was with me when I felt unwell. Marcus's expression hardened as he observed the intertwined hands Eleanor and Julian had forgotten to separate. A very close friend, apparently, he commented with sarcasm. Lily, why don't you go get something to drink? I'm not a child, Dad, the teenager protested, sensing the tension. And I know Dr. Hayes. He was Mom's doctor. Her doctor. Marcus raised his voice. Are you dating your doctor, Eleanor? Is that the example you want to set for our daughter? He's not my doctor, Eleanor clarified, feeling the stress worsen her headache. And my personal life stopped being your concern 2 years ago. It's my concern when it affects our daughter, Marcus insisted. What kind of professional dates their patients? Julian, who had maintained a diplomatic calm, finally intervened. I transferred Eleanor's case precisely to avoid any ethical conflict, he explained in a firm but quiet voice. And I would appreciate it if you lowered your voice. Eleanor needs to rest. The scene intensified when Marcus, visibly agitated, began to question Julian's professionalism. Lily watched in horror as Eleanor tried to mediate from the bed. Stop it! Lily finally exclaimed, tears in her eyes. Can't you see you're making everything worse? Mom is sick. Her words brought immediate silence. Marcus stepped back, ashamed, while Julian looked worriedly at Eleanor, whose monitor showed an increase in her heart rate. I'm sorry, Marcus murmured. I got worried when the clinic called. Eleanor nodded wearily. I understand, but I need quiet now. After Marcus left, promising to return the next day, Lily remained by her mother's side. She observed Julian with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Did you really stop being her doctor so you could date her? She asked directly. Julian smiled faintly at her frankness. Yes, there are rules about these things and they're important. And you've liked her for 20 years? The teenager continued. Lily, Eleanor warned. Some people leave footprints that time doesn't erase. Julian replied with sincerity, looking at Eleanor. Your mother is one of them. The answer seemed to momentarily satisfy Lily, who nodded thoughtfully. That night, while Eleanor finally rested under light sedatives, Julian received a call that would change the course of their newly rediscovered relationship. The Neurological Institute of Paris was offering him the directorship of their new research center, an opportunity he had pursued for years. As he watched Eleanor sleep, Julian faced the cruel irony. Just when he had finally found her again, fate seemed determined to separate them once more. The following days were a whirlwind for Eleanor. After undergoing a series of exhaustive exams, Dr. Ramsey confirmed that her migraines were a symptom of a rare neurological condition that would require specialized treatment. Fortunately, it's treatable, the doctor explained during the consultation, where Eleanor, now recovered from the episode, listened attentively with Lily by her side. But you'll need constant follow-up with specialists in this field. Can I continue working? Eleanor asked, thinking of the restoration projects she had pending. With certain precautions, yes, the doctor replied, though I'd recommend reducing hours exposed to solvents. As they left the consultation, Eleanor noticed that Julian hadn't answered her messages since the previous day. His absence was palpable, especially after he had been so present during her hospitalization. Dr. Hayes hasn't come to see you, Lily observed as they returned home. Did you fight? No, honey, Eleanor replied, though doubt was settling in her mind. He must be busy. That same afternoon, while she was organizing her medications, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, she found Julian with a grave expression. We need to talk, he said simply. They sat in the living room, an untouched coffee cup in front of each of them. Julian seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. I've been offered the directorship of the new Neurological Institute in Paris, he finally announced. It's the opportunity I've worked for my entire career. Eleanor felt something crumble inside her but maintained her composure. Congratulations, she said sincerely. I always knew you'd achieve great things. Eleanor, he began, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. The timing couldn't be worse. History repeats itself, doesn't it? She smiled sadly. Paris always seems to separate us. Julian took her hands in his. I haven't accepted yet. I wanted to talk to you first. You can't turn it down for me, Eleanor replied firmly. It wouldn't be fair. And what's fair about finding you after 20 years only to lose you again? The intensity in his voice surprised them both. The silence that followed was charged with conflicting emotions. Eleanor thought of her daughter, her work, the life she had built in Chicago. Julian thought of the years of professional sacrifice, the opportunities he had patiently awaited. I need time to think about it, he finally said. The offer is open until the end of the month. The conversation was interrupted by Lily's arrival, laden with grocery bags. The teenager assessed the scene shrewdly. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, leaving the groceries in the kitchen. "Not at all," Eleanor replied, trying to sound casual. "Julian just stopped by to see how I was doing." Lily looked at both of them alternately. "I'll be in my room. I have homework." Once alone again, Julian approached Eleanor. "There's something else you should know," he said gravely. "I consulted your case with colleagues in Paris. The institute where I'm being offered the position has a specialized program for your exact condition." Eleanor looked at him, surprised. "Are you suggesting I go to Paris for treatment?" "I'm suggesting you consider all options," he replied cautiously. "The treatment there could be more effective than anything available here." The idea floated between them, laden with implications. It wasn't just a medical issue but a veiled proposal to accompany him, to try to build a life together that had been denied them 2 decades earlier. "I need to talk to Lily first," Eleanor said finally. "Her life is here, her friends, her school." Julian nodded understandingly. "Of course. I'm not asking for an answer now." When Julian left, Eleanor remained for a long time contemplating the city from her window. The proposal opened possibilities she had never considered, but also deeply rooted fears. That night, when Lily was already in bed, Eleanor knocked softly on her door. "Can I come in?" she asked. The teenager was sitting on her bed, surrounded by books. "Are you going to tell me what's wrong with the doctor?" she asked directly. Eleanor smiled at her insight. "He's been offered an important job in Paris, and he wants you to go with him," Lily completed, surprising her mother. "I'm not stupid, Mom. It's not that simple," Eleanor explained, sitting beside her. "They have specialists there for my condition. Better treatments than what we have here." Lily was silent for a moment, processing the information. "Do you love him?" she finally asked, with a maturity that surpassed her years. The question took Eleanor by surprise. "It's complicated, honey. What we felt 20 years ago." "I didn't ask about the past," Lily interrupted. "I asked if you love him now." Eleanor considered the question honestly. The weeks since their reunion had awakened feelings she thought forgotten, but had also created something new, more mature and profound than that teenage love. "Yes," she finally replied. "I think I do." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Dad never looked at you the way he looks at you." The simple, direct observation brought unexpected tears to Eleanor's eyes. "Your father and I loved each other very much," she defended. "I know," Lily conceded, "but it was different. With Dad you always seemed, I don't know, contained." The silence that followed was full of unsaid truths. Eleanor hugged her daughter, surprised by her intuition. "I won't make any decision without considering you first," she assured. "You're the most important thing in my life." "I know," Lily replied, "but you deserve to be happy too, Mom." The following weekend, Julian invited Eleanor and Lily to his country house on the outskirts of Chicago. The property, modest but cozy, revealed another side of him. Books piled everywhere, an antique piano in a corner, photographs of his humanitarian trips. While Lily explored the garden, Eleanor and Julian shared a moment of quiet intimacy on the terrace. "If you accept the position," she began, "when would you have to leave?" "In 2 months, he replied. "Enough time to close my cases here." Eleanor nodded, looking towards where Lily was photographing butterflies among the flowers. "I can't ask her to abandon everything to follow me," she murmured. "I'm not asking you to decide now," Julian said, taking her hand. "I just want you to know that, whatever your decision, I will respect it." That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Eleanor and Julian remained in front of the fireplace, the crackling of the fire accompanying their conversation. The barriers they had maintained began to fade with each shared word, with each sustained gaze. "I'm scared," she confessed, "of risking everything again, of trusting." Julian approached slowly, his eyes reflecting the dance of the flames. "I'm scared too, of losing you again, of wasting this second chance." The kiss that followed was inevitable, as if 20 years of separation condensed into a single moment. Their lips met with the familiarity of old lovers and the excitement of rediscovery. When they separated, Julian kept his forehead resting against hers. "I don't want to pressure you," he whispered, "but I need you to know that, this time, I will fight for us." That night, in the dimness of the room lit only by the moon, Eleanor and Julian rediscovered each other completely. It wasn't just a physical encounter, but the reconnection of two souls separated by time but never completely unlinked. Each caress, each whisper carried the weight of unshared histories and promises to fulfill. Afterward, while Julian slept, Eleanor contemplated the ceiling, aware of having crossed a threshold. For the first time in years, she felt her heart was completely awake, vibrant with possibilities and fears in equal measure. "I'm afraid of building something that might disappear again," she confessed when she sensed him awaken. Julian held her closer. "Me too. I don't want to make decisions we'll regret later." "And what if I go to Paris and it doesn't work out?" she asked, verbalizing her greatest fear. "What if Lily resents me for taking her away from her life here?" "We have no guarantees," he answered honestly. "Only the will to try." The next morning, as they were returning to the city, they received the call from Dr. Ramsey. Eleanor's latest results showed a worrying progression. She would need more aggressive treatment, preferably with specialists in her specific condition. "The best are in Paris," the doctor confirmed, "at the Neurological Institute." The coincidence seemed too perfect, almost predestined. As Julian drove in silence, Eleanor understood that fate, which had once separated them, now seemed determined to bring them together again. "I think the universe is sending us a pretty clear message," she finally commented with a slight smile. Julian glanced at her briefly, hope illuminating his eyes. "What are you saying?" "That perhaps it's time for both of us to stop fighting the current," Eleanor replied, taking his hand, "and start building something together." The smile that lit up Julian's face was answer enough. The obstacles were still there. Lily's adaptation, the logistics of moving their lives, the uncertainties of the treatment. But for the first time in 20 years, the future seemed full of possibilities instead of regrets. The following days passed in a whirlwind of decisions and preparations. Julian formally accepted the directorship of the Neurological Institute of Paris with a special condition. He would need flexibility to travel regularly to Chicago. The board of directors, eager to have his expertise, agreed to his terms with surprising ease. "I can't believe they accepted," Eleanor commented one afternoon while they were browsing apartments online. "I thought these institutions were more rigid." Julian smiled, closing his laptop. "Let's just say they had a special interest in my research on non-invasive treatments. Or perhaps in your connections with millionaire donors," she joked, remembering photos of charity galas she had seen in his study. "That also helps," he conceded with a knowing smile. The real surprise came when Eleanor received a call from the National Art Museum of France. They had been impressed with her work at the Chicago exhibition and offered her a consultancy to restore several Hispano-American colonial works. "Did you talk to them about me?" Eleanor asked Julian after hanging up, still stunned by the coincidence. "I only mentioned your exhibition to a friend on the board of trustees," he admitted. "Your talent did the rest." Lily, for her part, alternated between excitement for the adventure and fear of leaving her life in Chicago behind. One afternoon, while packing her favorite books, she openly confronted her worries. "What if I don't adapt?" she asked, sitting among half-filled boxes. "What if I hate school there?" Eleanor sat beside her, hugging her gently. "Then we'll come back, I promise. This is a trial for all of us, not a sentence." The negotiation with Marcus was surprisingly civil. After the incident at the hospital, he had adopted a more understanding attitude, especially when he understood the seriousness of Eleanor's condition. "Paris has excellent universities," he commented during lunch, where they discussed the details of shared custody. "It could be a great opportunity for Lily." "Thank you for understanding," Eleanor replied, genuinely grateful. "And, of course, you can visit her whenever you want." "Are you sure about this, Eleanor?" he asked with sincere concern. About Julian? Eleanor considered the question carefully. I'm sure I deserve to find out. That we both deserve it. The logistics of the move were complicated but manageable. Eleanor sublet her apartment in Chicago, unwilling to completely sever her ties with the city. Julian, meanwhile, went ahead to prepare the ground in Paris and coordinate his integration into the institute. I miss you, she confessed during a late-night video call, 2 weeks after his departure. The house feels empty without you. Only 2 more weeks, he promised, his image pixelated by the poor connection. I've already found a perfect apartment near Park Güell. I think Lily will love the view. The day before their departure, while checking the last details, Eleanor found a small box on her desk with a note from Julian. Open this when you arrive in Paris. The flight passed between anxiety and hope. Lily, initially tense, gradually relaxed as they talked about the possibilities awaiting them. By the time they landed at Charles de Gaulle, both shared a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Julian was waiting for them at the airport, with a smile that lit up the weariness of the long journey. The hug they shared, observed with curiosity by passengers, contained the promise of a new beginning. Welcome home, he said simply. And in those words, Eleanor felt a certainty she hadn't experienced in years. The apartment turned out to be more beautiful than the photos showed. Spacious and bright, with a terrace offering spectacular views of the city, and decorated with small touches that revealed how much Julian had thought of them. Art books for Eleanor, a room painted in Lily's favorite color, even plants similar to those they had in Chicago. It's perfect, Eleanor murmured, moved by the attention to detail. That night, when Lily finally fell asleep, exhausted from the journey, Eleanor remembered the mysterious box. She opened it with curiosity to find a small, worn, leather-bound diary. They're the letters I never sent you, Julian explained, watching her from the bedroom doorway. I wrote them all, even though I knew you'd never read them. With trembling hands, Eleanor opened the diary. The pages were filled with Julian's youthful handwriting, evolving over time to the more defined calligraphy of the man she now knew. They were testaments of love, confessions, unanswered questions, a tangible record of a love that had never truly died. My dearest Eleanor, she read aloud, the words written 20 years ago. Today marks 1 month since we parted. Dad says I'll eventually forget, that we're young and first love never lasts. But I know he's wrong. There are things time cannot erase. Tears blurred her vision as she turned the pages, each letter capturing a moment of their separate lives. His first day at university, her graduation, fragments of their lives that had run in parallel, never touching but never completely disconnected. I kept them all, Julian said, sitting beside her. Even after I got married. Even when I tried to convince myself I had forgotten you. Eleanor closed the diary, overwhelmed by emotion. Why are you showing them to me now? Because I want you to understand that this, he gestured between them, is not a whim of fate or a romantic fantasy. It's something that has existed through time and distance, that has survived despite everything. The treatment at the institute began the following week. Eleanor was surprised to find that Julian had coordinated everything to coincide with her schedule at the museum, allowing her to combine her therapy with her professional passion. The first months were about adaptation. Lily, initially resistant, began to make friends at her new school, captivated by the city's architecture and the freedom of moving in an environment where language wasn't a barrier. Eleanor, for her part, flourished under the specialized treatment, noticing a gradual but steady improvement in her symptoms. The relationship with Julian deepened naturally. Living together revealed new facets of both. Eleanor's nocturnal habits, Julian's almost obsessive meticulousness with certain details, the way they both learned to adapt and complement each other. It wasn't perfect. They had arguments, moments of doubt, sudden nostalgia, but with each overcome obstacle, their connection strengthened. 6 months after their arrival, fulfilling his promise, they returned to Chicago for Lily to spend time with her father and Eleanor to visit family and friends. The reception at O'Hare, with Marcus waiting with flowers for his daughter, confirmed they had made the right decision. You look well, Marcus commented to Eleanor as they waited for their luggage. Healthier? More happy? Yes, that, she completed with a smile. The treatment must be working. It's not just the treatment, she replied, looking towards where Julian was helping Lily with her suitcase. It's everything. During that visit, Eleanor and Julian closed a pending circle. They traveled to that Michigan lake town, visiting the places that had marked their teenage romance. The hill where they watched sunsets, the lake where they swam in summer, the ice cream parlor where they shared Sundays. It's strange, Eleanor commented as they watched the sunset from their hill. It's the same place, but we are so different. Do you regret? Julian asked, a slight fear in his voice. Having waited so long? Eleanor reflected on the question, on the paths they had taken, on the daughter she loved and the life she had built. No, she answered honestly. I think we needed to live through all of that to be truly ready for each other. Life found a natural rhythm between two countries. Julian's arrangement with the Institute worked well, allowing them to spend time in both places. Eleanor, completely recovered after a year of treatment, continued her work with the French National Museum while maintaining restoration projects in Chicago. Lily, now fully adapted, talked about studying medicine inspired by Julian, though without openly admitting it. One afternoon, almost 2 years after their reunion in that examination room, Eleanor returned for her final checkup. Dr. Ramsey, visiting Paris for a conference, had insisted on being the one to confirm her complete recovery. Sitting in an examination room similar to where it all began, Eleanor experienced a strange déjà vu. When the door opened, instead of the doctor, Julian entered. "Where's Dr. Ramsey?" Eleanor asked, surprised. "She'll be here in a few minutes," he replied, smiling mysteriously. "I wanted to see you first." He sat across from her, taking her hands in his. "It's strange, isn't it?" he commented, looking around. "How life comes full circle. From one exam room to another," she joked. "Though I prefer this ending to the first one." Julian nodded thoughtfully. "Do you know what day it is today?" Eleanor tried to remember. "Tuesday. It's the exact anniversary of our reunion," he explained. 2 years since you walked into my office and left me speechless." The memory made her smile. "I was terrified and half naked in that horrible hospital gown. To me, you were beautiful," he assured her. "As beautiful as the day I met you, as yesterday as now." There was something in his tone that made Eleanor look at him more attentively. "What are you plotting, Dr. Hayes?" "Sometimes the best diagnoses are the ones that lead us back to ourselves," he said, gently squeezing her hands. "To who we really are. To what really matters." Eleanor smiled, recognizing the depth behind his words. "And sometimes healing comes in ways medicine can't explain." "Exactly," Julian replied, leaning in to kiss her softly. "Welcome to your new life, Eleanor. A completely healthy life." When Dr. Ramsey entered minutes later, she found the couple conversing quietly, hands clasped. Their gazes connected in a way that transcended words. The doctor smiled, satisfied as much by her patient's physical recovery as by the evident healing of her heart. "It seems my work here is complete," she commented, reviewing the final results. "Officially, Mrs. Vance, you are discharged." As they left the clinic into the Parisian midday light, Eleanor and Julian walked in a knowing silence, the kind only shared by those who have found home in each other. "Where to now?" she asked. Julian smiled, taking her hand. "Wherever we want. We have all the time in the world." 2 years later, the gallery gleamed under strategically placed lights. Eleanor moved through the space, adjusting last-minute details before the first guests arrived. The exhibition, Neurons and Canvases, Dialogues between Science and Art, was the result of 2 years of collaborative work between the Neurological Institute and the French National Art Museum. "You're nervous," observed Lily, elegant in a black dress that accentuated her growing maturity. At 18, recently accepted into medical school in Paris, she had her mother's same natural grace combined with her own confidence. "I'm always nervous before an opening," Eleanor admitted, adjusting a label next to a restored portrait that showed patterns curiously similar to brain scans. "It's part of the ritual." Dad just sent a message, Lily commented, checking her phone. His flight lands in an hour. He says he'll come straight here. Eleanor smiled, still surprised by how her relationship with Marcus had evolved. Time and distance had transformed their bitter divorce into a cordial friendship, strengthened by their shared love for their daughter. Perfect. Julian left his name on the guest list. The dynamic between the two men had also softened. Regular visits to Chicago and Marcus's trips to Paris to see Lily had created a mutual understanding based on respect. Julian appeared from a side room, impeccable in his dark suit. Despite the long hours at the Institute, he maintained the energy and passion that characterized him. The ambassador just confirmed his attendance, he announced, approaching to kiss Eleanor lightly. And the Minister of Culture will also be here. Now I understand why you're nervous, Lily joked. I'm going to find my friends before this place fills up with important people. When they were alone, Julian wrapped his arm around Eleanor's waist, contemplating the space they had created together. The exhibition not only showcased restored works with neurological themes, but also included artistic visualizations of brain scans and neuronal patterns captured during Eleanor's treatment and that of other patients. Did you ever imagine we'd end up like this? She asked, leaning against him. When I saw you in my Chicago office 4 years ago, honestly, at that moment, I could only think about staying professional while my heart was leaping out of my chest. He confessed with a smile. But I always knew you were special. Always. The gallery gradually began to fill. Colleagues from the Institute, artists, critics, donors. Eleanor and Julian moved among the guests with the natural synchronization of those who have found their rhythm together. They didn't need to be constantly together, each shone in their own field, but periodically they sought each other out with their eyes, sharing knowing smiles across the room. Mrs. Vance, one of the neurologists who had treated her during her first visits, approached her. Your recovery continues to be one of our most notable cases. Have you had any residual symptoms? None in over a year, Eleanor replied. Your team did an extraordinary job. The credit goes to Dr. Hayes, the doctor insisted. His combined approach revolutionized our protocols, although, he added with a smile, I suspect there were additional factors in your case that we cannot replicate in other patients. Eleanor smiled, understanding the implication. Medicine always has an inexplicable component, don't you think, doctor? Later, as the crowd began to disperse, Eleanor found Julian on the gallery's terrace, contemplating the lights of Paris. She approached silently, slipping her hand into his. Lily left with her friends, she commented, and Marcus decided to go straight to the hotel. He said he'd see us for lunch tomorrow. Julian nodded, gently squeezing her hand. You know, I was thinking about our first summer in Michigan, how we planned our future with the absolute certainty of 18-year-olds. We were so naive, Eleanor smiled. So sure everything would be easy. And yet, here we are, he continued. Not in the way we imagined, not by the path we expected, but together at last. Eleanor contemplated the city that was now also her home. Her life had found a balance she never thought possible. Dividing her time between two countries, maintaining her flourishing career, watching her daughter become an independent and confident young woman. Do you regret anything? She asked, a question that occasionally arose between them, like a reminder to cherish the present. Julian considered the question as he always did. Not having fought harder back then, perhaps. But every decision, every detour, brought us here. I can't regret a path that brought you back to me. They hadn't formalized their relationship with papers or ceremonies. They didn't need them. Their commitment manifested in everyday details. The way Julian always remembered her checkups, even though she was fully recovered. How Eleanor kept their connection to Chicago alive, bringing small mementos from each trip. Lily's natural integration into their dynamic, the shared routines and respected spaces. We should go, Eleanor suggested after a moment. Tomorrow will be a long day. Julian nodded, but before moving, he drew her to him in an embrace that contained 4 years of shared life and 20 of waiting. I love you, he murmured against her hair. More than when we were young, more each day. And I you, she replied simply. As they walked through the gallery towards the exit, greeting the last guests, Eleanor reflected on the improbable path that had reunited them. A medical condition that could have been devastating but ended up being the catalyst for their reunion. A literal undressing in that first exam that had led to a metaphorical bearing of their souls over time. Stepping out into the Parisian night hand in hand, they needed no words. The extraordinariness of their story had transformed into the quiet certainty of their present. And for two people who had waited 20 years to find each other again, that shared everydayness was the greatest miracle of all. And that, dear listeners, is how a chance encounter in a doctor's office can rewrite a life story. Eleanor and Julian's journey reminds us that true love can withstand time, distance, and even the most painful goodbyes. Sometimes, the paths we're forced to take, the detours and the heartbreaks, are exactly what we need to become ready for the love that's truly meant for us. What do you think? Can love truly conquer all, even after decades apart? Have you ever experienced a second chance at a connection you thought was lost forever? Share your stories and thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. If this story of enduring love and fate's mysterious ways touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to our channel for more tales that inspire, and share it with someone who believes in the power of second chances. Because sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that take the longest to write their happy ending.